Let's get into the practical differences between single and double-walled tents. Hello, I'm Jason. If you've been following this channel for a while, you pretty much know that I am very unlikely to say this piece of gear is the best or that piece of gear is the worst. As long as we aren't using complete junk that falls apart in the field, we are going to be confronted with the reality that all gear has trade-offs. Several weeks ago, I got asked a question about trade-offs around a specific type of gear. So today, we are talking about the trade-offs that come from single versus double-walled tent designs. Why am I talking about camping again? Well, I firmly believe that camping is a climbing skill. If we do big routes in the alpine or big mountains, we likely need to know how to progress a camp up that mountain. Heck, in the winter, road closures due to snow can lengthen round-trip hikes and make our rock climbing project better served from an intermediate camp rather than the trailhead. And we need to know how to camp well enough to not just get by, but to make it restorative to our mind and body. One of the foundations of a good camp is knowing what tent to bring, and it doesn't get more fundamental than understanding the trade-offs that come from considering single-walled versus double-walled tents. Let's start with condensation management, because it is what really drives the logic behind having any double-walled tent in the first place. We have two competing demands of our tent fabric. We need breathable fabric so that air can circulate through. We don't want the cold night air on one side of the fabric and our warm, vapor-filled breath on the other side of the fabric, because then you get condensation on that fabric, which can drip on you and your stuff, rendering things like down sleeping bags less warm due to saturation. On the other hand, we need non-breathable, waterproof fabric to keep any precipitation outside from getting in. So a double-walled tent handles this by having a breathable inner tent and a waterproof outer fly. Our warm breath with water vapor passes through the inner fabric and gets trapped at the outer fly. There, it may form water droplets, but now if those droplets shed, they fall back onto the inner tent, which can easily block the larger molecules of the now liquid water, keeping us dry. The most obvious trade-off is weight. We have an entire second fabric piece in the shelter, and the fabric is what makes up most of our tent weight. Single-walled tents are dramatically lighter, but struggle more with condensation. We simply must have a waterproof barrier, and if we only have one barrier instead of two, we can't make that one layer too breathable before it stops being waterproof. But advances in composite fabrics have both A, closed the gap some on the condensation problem, and B, have widened the gap in terms of weight savings. The high-end single-walled tents are now using Dyneema composites that can weigh literally half the weight per yard compared to sil nylon fabric. The composites also have improved breathability while maintaining the waterproof performance. But there still will be no condensation comparison between a single-walled and double-walled option. In addition, single-walled tents will usually be easier and faster to set up as we don't have two layers to pitch. And we need to be careful and make sure that the double-walled tents are guyed out well, keeping the outer fly from touching the inner tent, or we can get water transfer from the two surfaces. Some double-walled tents fix this by permanently creating distance between the fly and the inner layer so that they don't touch one another. Pitched correctly, though, most double-walled tents will keep the inner environment far more livable in far harsher conditions than most single-walled tents. All of that leads to different ideal uses if we make some assumptions around standard designs. For example, most double-walled tents come with a vestibule, which increases the weather-protected square footage for gear storage. It also gives us a place to cook in inclement weather, although I must add the requisite warning that no manufacturer recommends this due to the risk of burning your tent. But besides getting hot food on a cold or wet day, this also warms the tent. Plus, because of the far superior breathability of the inner tent, we don't have to worry as much about the steam from our cooking just adding to the condensation problem. And speaking of warmth, because we need to leave more of a single-walled tent open to vent away our moisture-containing breath, as well as to ensure we get enough air to breathe well with the less permeable walls, a single-walled tent will expose us to the outside cold more than a double-walled tent. Certainly, we can make good use of double-walled tents when car camping, which has zero weight consideration. But also, base camps and high-altitude camps use double walls where having something that is close to storm-proof and which can store a lot of gear starts to make a lot of sense when we are keeping those tents in place for a prolonged period of time. However, that larger footprint, due to the vestibule, could mean that an alpine perch on some small ledge wouldn't even be possible, so maybe the smaller single-wall designs make more sense for technical routes. And we certainly see most backpackers, who are doing the opposite of staying in one place for periods of time, opt for extremely light shelters and thus move to single-wall and often Dyneema composite tents. But now we might also want to factor in the climate in which we are adventuring. The higher in altitude we go, the less moisture we find in the air. Also, the colder it gets, the less moisture the air holds. So in those dry climates, we may still get condensation on a single-walled tent, but we get a lot less. On the flip side, though, when I go to really high altitude, I'm going to respirate a lot more, often twice as much, putting more vapor into the microclimate inside of my tent. And then there are also plenty of lower altitude, humid places that hold quite a bit of moisture in the air, regardless. Really, this gets down to a fundamental consideration, and it's much the same consideration we have for most adventures in the outdoors. We can be more comfortable while moving, or we can be more comfortable while staying put. A single-walled tent's low weight means a lot more comfort while on the move. That matters for thru hikers. And for fast and light alpine missions, it might mean more than just comfort. It may mean moving fast enough to beat the storm, or have a lower pack volume to not get in the way of our technical climbing. It may mean safety. But it could also mean either a little or a lot less comfort overnight, depending on the breathability of a particular fabric, the climate we pitch our tent in, and the likelihood of getting caught in a storm. What do you like or dislike about single or double-walled tents? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching this video. Please like, subscribe, and share if you want to support us. For more information, you can go to our website at www.shortguysbetaworks.com. You can check out a related video on 3 tips for staying warm in a cold camp, or maybe you'd be interested in our entire cold weather series. We'll see you next week, and keep on getting more out of that big outside.